Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going back to a specific Friday in February 1993. It's the 12th, the New Strand Shopping Center in Bootle, Merseyside. Just a loud, busy, totally normal afternoon.
It's the kind of day that just fades into the background,
Yeah.
until something happens that makes it impossible to forget. And for Denise Bulger, that moment happened in a heartbeat. She was at the butcher shop, A.R. Tim's.
Right.
She lets go of her 2-year-old son, James's hand, to pay for some chops, just for a second.
And that is the primal nightmare, isn't it?
Oh,
You
yeah.
turn around, you look down, and where your child should be, there's just nothing.
Exactly. And looking at the initial police reports in our stack, the reaction was, standard procedure, panic, security announcements over the tannoy,
Right.
a frantic search.
But everyone, the police, the public, his mother, they were all working from the same script.
They were. A very specific assumption.
Stranger danger. The man in the van. The bogeyman.
Right. They were looking for a predatory adult. But then they pulled the CCTV tapes, and those grainy black and white images, they are just haunting because they didn't show a man dragging James away.
They showed two boys.
Robert Thompson and John Venables, both just 10 years old.
And that image, James just holding the hand of another child, it must have completely short-circuited the investigation at first.
It did, because it looks innocent. It looks like 3 kids just wandering off. But that single image was the beginning of a crime that I think changed the British psyche forever.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive. We're not just going through the timeline of a tragedy. We have a stack of sources here. Criminal psychology papers, actual witness statements, trial transcripts, and we need to solve the central mystery of this case.
The mystery is a long walk.
Exactly, because this is the part that just keeps me up at night. How do 2 10-year-olds walk a crying, injured toddler 2.5 miles across a major city in broad daylight, passing 38 separate witnesses, and no one stops them?
It just sounds impossible. To understand it, we have to look at who Thompson and Venables were that day. These weren't kids who just, made a snap decision.
The sources say they were playing truant from school.
They were. And if you look at their activity before the abduction, it's just this chaotic trail of petty crime. They were shoplifting sweets, batteries, and specifically a tin of blue Humbrol modeling paint.
Which becomes a horrific piece of evidence later on.
Tragically, yes. But the really terrifying nugget in the police interrogation transcripts is the intent. One of the boys later admitted they were actively looking for a child to take. And get this, the original plan wasn't even to walk a child away.
What was it?
It was to lure a child to the busy road right next to the shopping center and push them into traffic.
Wow. That is calculated. That isn't just mischief. That's a desire for destruction.
It is. But when that chance didn't come, at 3:42 p.m., the CCTV catches them leading James out of the mall. And that's the start of the journey.
Okay, so they're out in the open. 2.5 miles. This isn't some dark alleyway. And this brings us to the Liverpool 38, the 38 people who saw them. Now, the easy narrative here is bystander apathy, right? The idea that people just didn't care.
And that's a narrative we have to debunk right now. There's a really compelling academic paper in our stack that analyzes this exact thing. It argues it wasn't apathy. It was something called social categorization.
Okay, let's unpack that. What does that mean in, a practical sense?
It's a mental shortcut. When your brain sees something ambiguous, it tries to file it into a box it understands. When these witnesses saw 3 young boys, 2 older, 1 younger, their brains didn't file it under abduction.
They filed it under family.
Exactly. You see that and you think, oh, those are brothers. And once you apply that brother label, the rules of engagement just completely change. In our society, you intervene in a crime. You do not intervene in a family squabble.
That's such a powerful point. If I see a stranger dragging a kid, I step in. If I see an older brother dragging a younger brother who's having a tantrum, I probably just think, glad that's not me, and keep walking.
You mind your own business. It's a social contract. And Thompson and Venables, whether they knew the psychology behind it or not, were absolute masters at exploiting this.
Let's look at the evidence for that. The encounter with the witness, Mrs. I.H. She actually stopped them, didn't she?
She did. One of the few who physically engaged. Joe had a bump on his forehead by this point. Mrs. I.H. saw the injury. She saw he was crying. She asked them what was happening.
So the apathy argument just falls apart right there. She cared enough to stop.
She cared. But the boys told her, we are going home. And because she had already categorized them as siblings, that answer satisfied her. She told them to hurry home to their mum. The lie worked because it fit the picture she'd already painted in her head.
Then you have child E, This one is even more complex because he actually knew one of them.
Yet, Child E was an older boy who knew Robert Thompson. He saw them struggling with James, and he asked, "Who's that?" And this is where John Venables shows this just terrifying level of quick thinking.
Hmm.
He immediately says, "It's my little brother."
So even though the witness knew Thompson, he didn't know Venables well enough to know he didn't have a brother.
Correct. And look at what Child E does. He doesn't walk away. He actually threatens them. He says, "I'll batter you if you don't take him home to his mom."
That's wild. So he was effectively policing them, but policing them as a family unit.
He was enforcing the good brother rule, not stopping a kidnapping. He saw the distress, but that brother lie just acted like a shield.
There's one more interaction that really stands out. A Mr. W.H. This was near the end of the walk, closer to the railway line.
This one just chills me. Mr. W.H. sees them. But before he can even form a question, Venables launches a preemptive strike. He starts complaining, loud enough for the man to hear. He says, "I'm fed up of having my little brother, and I'm going to tell me mom."
He's complaining about babysitting.
It's a tactic called inoculation. By acting like a frustrated older brother, he completely disarmed the witness. He created this fake family drama that was so convincing, the witness felt it would be rude to interfere.
So the tragedy isn't that 38 people didn't care. It's that 38 people were, I guess, hacked. Their social programming was used against them.
Precisely. The boys used the privacy of the family to commit a public abduction.
Eventually, that walk ends. They reach the railway line near the old Walton and Anfield station. And we have to talk about what happened there. I know it's difficult, but the brutality of it is relevant to the legal storm that followed.
It is relevant.
Yeah.
Because this wasn't an accident. The forensic facts. They paint a picture of prolonged, escalating violence. We mentioned the blue paint they stole.
Yeah, the tin from the shop.
They threw that paint into James's left eye. They forced the batteries they stole into his mouth. They threw bricks and stones. And then ultimately they dropped a 10-kilogram railway fish plate, this heavy iron bar on his head.
The pathologist report in the file says there were 42 separate injuries.
And the final act was maybe the most calculating of all. They laid his body across the railway tracks. They were trying to stage an accident.
Which means they understood the concept of covering their tracks. They knew this was wrong and had to be hidden.
Absolutely. And tragically, a train did sever the body. But the forensics were clear. James had already died before that happened.
His body was found 2 days later. And the investigation, it moved pretty fast, but it wasn't some free tech thing that caught them, was it?
No, it was the community.
Yeah.
A woman was watching the news, saw the enhanced CCTV images from the mall, and she recognized John Venables. She knew he often skipped school with Robert Thompson. She called it in.
And once they had the boys, the physical evidence was just overwhelming.
It was undeniable. They found the blue paint on their clothes. It was a chemical match to the paint on James. They found his blood on their shoes. DNA testing matched the blood on Thompson's shoe directly to James Bulger.
So they're arrested, and this moves us into the legal phase, which is where things get really controversial. November 1993, Preston Crown Court.
The atmosphere described in the news reports from that time is just medieval. It's a lynch mob. Crowds were attacking the police vans. But inside the courtroom, you have this completely surreal scene.
It was an adult trial, right, for 11-year-olds.
Yeah, they turned 11 by then.
Mm.
It was so ill-suited for children that they had to literally build a platform to raise the floor of the dock just so the boys could see over the railing.
And all through this, they're just child A and child B. But the prosecution had this huge legal hurdle to clear. A Latin term, doli incapax.
Doli incapax. It means incapable of evil. Now, under British law back then, there was this assumption that a child between 10 and 14 doesn't really know the difference between just being naughty and doing something that is criminally wrong.
Meaning if you're 11 and you steal something, the law assumes you didn't truly get the gravity of it unless the prosecution can prove you did.
Exactly. So they couldn't just prove they killed him. They had to prove they understood it was morally wrong to kill him.
How on earth did they do that?
They brought in psychiatrists. And the testimony is fascinating. They painted two very different pictures. Robert Thompson was described as the Pied Piper, the manipulator, the one who directed the violence.
The Venables.
Venables was the emotional one. He just wept through the interviews. He made these really disturbing comments, like he could smell James like a baby. But despite the tears, the experts concluded both boys absolutely knew right from wrong.
And the jury agreed, found guilty. The youngest convicted murderers in modern British history.
And that's when the political storm just erupts. The judge recommended they serve 8 years. The Lord Chief Justice said, no, let's make it 10.
But the public wanted more. A lot more.
The Sun newspaper ran a petition. They got almost 300,000 signatures demanding a longer sentence. And Michael Howard, the Home Secretary at the time, a politician, not a judge, he intervened. He raised the minimum term to 15 years.
That seems like a huge issue. Can a politician just overrule a judge because of a newspaper petition?
Well, that was the legal fallout. Years later, the House of Lords and the European Court of Human Rights both ruled that, no, you can't do that. You can't let a politician play judge to satisfy public anger. It changed how children are prosecuted in the UK.
But while the lawyers fought, society was trying to figure out why. We always need a reason, don't we?
We do, and the media latched onto the video nasty theory. There was a huge uproar that the boys had watched the horror movie Child's Play 3, which has the killer doll Chucky and a scene with blue paint.
It just feels like a very convenient scapegoat. The movie made them do it.
It was a classic moral panic. The police looked into it thoroughly. They found that John Venable's father had rented the movie, but there was zero evidence John had ever even seen it. It was society grasping for an easy answer instead of facing a much scarier reality.
That two kids just decided to kill another kid.
Exactly.
So let's fast forward. It's 2001. The boys are 18. They've served their 8 years. The parole board says they're no longer a danger. They get released.
And this is totally unprecedented territory. They're given lifelong anonymity, new names, new passports, a whole new history, a worldwide injunction preventing anyone from ever revealing who they are.
And the argument for that wasn't to be kind to them. It was purely practical, right? If their names got out, they would be killed.
The threat was very real. Vigilante justice was a guarantee. So the state spent millions to hide them. But this is where their stories just completely split.
Let's start with Thompson, the Pied Piper, the one the court thought was the ringleader.
By all accounts, and we're relying on leaks and government statements here, Robert Thompson has just vanished into a quiet life. He's held down jobs. There have been no reports of him ever reoffending.
Which suggests that, for him, rehabilitation actually worked.
It appears so. But John Venables, that is a completely different story.
His life since release has been a total disaster.
Just chaos. He's been recalled to prison multiple times, 2010 and then again in 2017. And the charges are not small things. He was caught with indecent images of children. The sources mention he was found with a pedophile manual.
And he didn't just break the law, he broke the anonymity rules himself.
He did. Reports say he'd get drunk and just tell friends and colleagues who he really was. He blew his own cover.
Which forces the government to step in, spend millions more, and create yet another new identity for him.
Exactly. And this brings us to the public sentiment today. We pulled threads from Reddit and other forums. The anger is still just palpable.
I can imagine. It's the monster narrative.
It is. The argument you see is, we accepted protecting a young offender who made a mistake. But why are we using taxpayer money to protect a repeat offender who is still preying on children?
It's a valid question. Does the duty of care just go on forever?
And does the right to a second chance apply when you just keep throwing it away? John Venable's case forces us to look at the limits of forgiveness. Thompson proves rehabilitation is possible. Venables suggests that for some, it might not be.
It's a deeply uncomfortable duality. One success story and one total failure, both tied to the same horrific event.
And the shadow of James Bulger just hangs over both of them.
So, what do we take away from this? When we strip away all the horror and the sensationalism, what are we left with?
I think we're left with a lesson about social blindness.
Yeah.
This wasn't a crime committed in the shadows. It happened in front of everyone. And it was allowed to happen because of a social rule we all follow without even thinking about it. Mind your own business.